Good afternoon everyone. I invite you to take a seat while we are settling the last technical details. But it allows me to welcome you to this side event. My name is Sandra Ratin. I'm with Franciscan International, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the organizers, which are our organization, Franciscans International, but also Fashion Opera, the Swiss London Fund, the Task Force Detainees of the Philippines, the Association of Major Religious Superiors in the Philippines, Forum Asia, PARA, I Defend, OMCT, FIDH, and Human Rights Watch. Before introducing our panelists and saying more on the content of our discussion today, I would just like to inform everyone in the room that any picture, video, and recording is forbidden for this event. We have only one colleague who will take some pictures, but for very internal purposes. So no recording and no pictures, no video, please. Thank you. And so it's also my pleasure to have with us three panelists today to talk about the human rights situation in the Philippines. This is first Father Christian Buenafe here, who will represent the Task Force Detainee for the Philippines, and Friar Angel Cortes, who is with the Association of Major Religious Superiors of the Philippines, and to my left, Mr. Eliezer Carlos, who is with the Philippine Alliance of Human Rights Advocates and in defense of human rights and dignity movement. And before giving them the floor, allow me to say just some very brief words on why we joined forces again to organize this event. Because as many of you will know, and I read the whole list of the co-organizers, I think it's a sign that many of us are very concerned about the situation in the Philippines, obviously. And again, obviously, or even sadly, I think nothing that you will hear here again is completely new. Since President Duterte assumed this office in 2016, we, as civil society in a broad sense, have deplored and denounced violence in words and in acts, as well as complete disrespect and disregard for human rights, but also for their defenders, human rights defenders, and their institutions at national and international level. And I'm not going into more details here about the situation of extrajudicial killings and the war on drugs, that is essentially a war on the poor, or about attacks against women, indigenous leaders, but also church and religious representatives, or human rights defenders, more generally speaking, including UN special rapporteurs, as most of you will know. Our panelists will do this in a minute. However, let me maybe end by saying that if we felt the need to organize another event once again all together, it's because of two things mainly. Because the situation is not getting better, it's aggravating, and this in a security and rule of law context that is explosive. So we had very concrete threats of a declaration of martial law for the entire country, and some of the panelists may come back to this. And we also urgently expect and request international action. And again, I will ask the panelists not only to describe the issues, the problems, and the situation, but also, as much as you can, also express the expectations, the recommendations on action on the international community at different levels. And really to finish, I think I would like to recall what Franciscans International, and that resonates with the position of other civil society organizations, asked to the Council under the general debate around the update of the High Commissioner on the Philippines to have an independent international investigation in the situation, and a really regular follow-up, including at the Human Rights Council. So with that, I'm closing my introductory remarks, and I'm giving the floor to you. Thank you.
Hello. There was this question a question was raised to me, what is new in the Philippines? Well, when I was here last year during the 36th session, there were 13,000 deaths. Now, what is new? We have 27,000 deaths and counting. So I am Father Christian Buenafe, a Carmelite priest from the Philippines. I co-chair the Task Force in Detainees of the Philippines with the Augustinian sister. And our mandate was to document cases of political prisoners and detainees. But over the years, we said it should be not limited to that. So all human rights for all. So aside from describing cases of torture, disappearances, illegal arrests, arbitrary arrests, I'd like to situate you with the human rights situation and the war on drugs in the Philippines. There are, at the back, we prepared some slides. Bladen Skylar Abatay is a 4-year-old kid who died during the anti-drug operations conducted by the Drug Enforcement Unit on July 13, 2018 in Sitio Bato, Ermita, Cebu City. He's 4 years old. He was excited to go to school. He has not even claimed yet his identification card as a student. He wanted to become a priest. He told his lola, and he was killed. I visited his wake, and two weeks ago we were in Cebu, and we were doing some follow-up for this case. This is one example of a victim of this senseless war on drugs, and he is just one of the 74 children killed and dismissed as collateral damage. So these are the issues that I would want to talk about. The kill policy of the government, which is actually state-sponsored, that the rise of killings every day. There are around 40 deaths every night, daytime. Before they were masked, now unmasked. They just enter internet cafes and shoot people. Then enforced disappearances, torture. There were cases of young people. They leave their houses and then all of a sudden they disappear, and then they are found after a couple of days tortured and dead. Another issue on human rights would be the risks and threats and attacks on human rights defenders. He openly calls the human rights defenders as obstacles to development. He was threatening us in public television. He does not believe in human rights. And so some of our HRDs felt they are not secure anymore. Sometimes they receive text messages and warning them, we know where you are, we know where your children go to school, something like that. So harassment is systematic. Then the children are caught in the war on drugs. Martial law in Mindanao, there are cases of human rights violations. Mr. Elisel would describe about what happened in Mindanao, really. And then there are moves in the House of Congress for the restoration of the capital punishment and the lowering of the minimum age of criminal responsibility from 50 years old to 9 years of age. So the human rights community are very active in lobbying, opposing these bills. Then the attacks on our democratic institutions, the Supreme Court, the Office of the Ombudsman, Ombudsperson, the Commission on Human Rights, among others. Attacks on all forms against the church, name-calling, lambasting the church leaders, the media, the human rights personalities, the civil liberties groups, and other political groups. The silencing of dissent and persecution of critics. Now we have Senator Laila de Lima, who is in prison, and now another senator is being harassed, and the fear of revoking his amnesty. And then misogyny and disrespect of women. I come from Davao City, where he comes from, our president. And then in the police record, the rape cases in Davao City is very high, number 1. And then when he was asked, what? You said there's peace and order in Davao City. How come the rape cases are very high? And he said in public TV, because there are beautiful women there. So it's the fault of the beautiful women. And so this misogynistic attitude of the president, no respect of at all at women. And then the proliferation of fake news, disinformation, and distortion of information. But because that is his mantra, kill criminals if you have to. I'll protect you, that's he said openly. Now to date, just to give you some numbers, now these are statistics, but these are name people's numbers, but they have names. As of Feb 18, from July 1, when he assumed the presidency, according to the Philippine National Police, there were 2,388 drug-related homicide. Next. But the total deaths killed in police and legitimate anti-drug operations as of March 20, 2018, from the Philippine Drugs Enforcement Agency, we have 4,075. Human Rights Watch had documented around 12,000 from 2016 to 2017. Next. And then total homicide from July to 2016 to November, according to the Supreme Court of the Philippines, around 20,322. Next, please. And then drug-related killings marked as death under investigation, around 22,983 from the Philippine National Police, 2018. Next. And the total deaths as of June this year, since he assumed the presidency, is 27,058. In August alone, in Cebu, where I come from, there were 24 deaths in that island alone in August. So that's not yet. So more or less around 28,000. So this state-sponsored war on drugs has made everyone vulnerable and easy target and victim. Anyone, everyone. No excuse. You may be a politician, a journalist, a religious leader, a young person, a human rights defender. Everyone is vulnerable. And because, of course, he doesn't believe in human rights, he only said, I would care for human lives, but not human rights. And human rights can be excused as shield or excuse to destroy the country. That's his word. And we therefore do not discount the possibility that some human rights groups have become unwittingly tools of drug lords to hinder the strides made by the administration. He is attacking all his critics, particularly the human rights defenders and the church. And so, gentlemen in his last, and gentlemen and gentlewomen in this hall, this was his words during his last address to the nation. The war against illegal drugs is far from over. The illegal drugs war will not be sidelined. Instead, it will be as relentless and chilling, if you will, as on the day of the gun. So the war is getting worse. I hope we can still be present here next session, because the human rights defenders are now endangered. The government is after us also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I think your presentation doesn't call for many comments, so I will give immediately the floor to Andre. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings of peace and goodwill. I am Angel Cortez. I am a Franciscan friar, and I am very thankful with our very own Franciscan International in Pasinofer for once again bringing me back here to call for the attention of what is happening in our country, because the world should know what is really happening in the Philippines. And that's why I want to present in follow-up with what Father Christian presented. Well, as you can see, that is the famous picture that is being distributed around the world, the face of extrajudicial killings. Every day, it's like a typical scenario in every places in the Philippines. But I want to share 2 short videos on how do they do it in the Philippines. This video is from Caloocan, a CCTV footage, and you can see there are 2 killers there from the motorcycle, and they will roam around going to their target, a poor tricycle driver, and they will immediately attack there, kill in front of a child. and then they will run as fast as they can. It is being said that they have GPS in their motorcycle so that the police will track where they are going. And it is happening every day, as if it's a normal endeavor in the Philippines. That's another man. And this one is another typical setup where the young people used to have internet in an internet shop. As if it's normal. But the killer will get his gun and then attack immediately. And as if it is normal. Therefore, even though I'm yet 1 year in my ministry as a priest, I was assigned with this ministry, and part of our ministry in the association is to have sanctuary with people who are witnesses, who really sees these daily killings, and we tend to care for them in our convents. And as I will show you, this is our night watch and day watch. We usually go to their families, not only to comfort them, but to really ask them on how are they, not only to say mass, but to listen to their grievances, to their cries. And this is in partnership with the task force detainees. And we are very thankful with Fasenofer and FI for supporting this endeavor. But one thing for sure, this picture is not like an event that usually happens once a year. It is daily. Sometimes we need to go for 9 families because there are 9 bodies being abducted and killed, and they will throw their bodies 5 blocks away from their houses. And with that, these faces will continually haunt us with our ministry. The different faces. Father Toots already discussed about Skylar, a 4-year-old boy. Melanie, who's just playing her Barbie doll. Budoy, who is a scholar and wanted to finish college. Ramon, who is a working student who wanted to work for his family. And Rowena, who is a choir member, was being killed after the choir practice. And the most famous one is Kian, who is being killed near their house. My dear brothers and sisters in the international community, I have the courage to come here because I want that the world should see what is really happening in the Philippines. I don't know how will I answer the questions that these children, the young people of our country, keeps on asking us. Not because I am a priest, not because we are human rights defender, but it is a question of humanity. And these faces keeps on haunting me of my ministry and work, not only as an NGO, but as a person. I want to end my presentation with a poem of one of the children of the victims of extrajudicial killings. And he entitled it, Death by Fear. This will be the picture you will paint with the tips of your fingers, indelible, as the ink that will seep through your nails. Blood trickles down the concrete roads, traction stronger than asphalt, thick and black, and then it flows like a river. In the middle of a valley of lifeless bodies, lives transfigure into numbers in an infographic. Names and memories morph into statistics. Eyes haze with fear are 0, to the kill count rounded to the nearest 1,000. After that, you lift your hands off the canvas. You will look at me in senseless wonder, and then you will ask me, what is that I want? Tell me, how is it that you complain of change, if change is what we always yearn for? And I will answer, fist clenched and yearning, that I want to be alive, that every dead man I did with a cardboard, packed in a garbage bag and duct taped, might as well be me, or my brother, or my dad. And I will tell you that I want peace of mind. I want home to feel like it and not a prison. Not a place where our words hold no power. Under the night sky, permanent serrated its cold whimper, a lullaby for children with no homes, empty of pity, where at gunpoint our lives begin to lose value, where our minds will stretch in prayer because our fingers will unavailable to move, where our necks will pave a way for the noose holding our epitaph, where no one will know how feel is deadlier. Ladies and gentlemen of the international community, please help us. Please help us that the world will see what is really happening in our country under President Rodrigo Duterte. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Angel, for this testimony, and thank to all of you for the courage as well to come to here to, again, knowing the threats as well and what it costs to tell these stories. Again, no big comments on I mean, the pictures and the figures speak for themselves. But now maybe continuing what you just said with Elisa, what can the international, or should the international community do in the face of these terrible facts and pictures? Please. And sorry, before you take the floor, I would like to remind everyone, and the gentleman in particular, that it is forbidden to record and to take any pictures or video of this side event. Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
Good reasons.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ms. Sandra. Of course, the reason is that human rights defenders, especially truth tellers, coming here to the UN are now at risk, no? But I'd like to update the figures on the children killed under the Duterte regime. The Task Force Detainees of the Philippines and the Association of Major Religious Superiors are actually members of the largest human rights coalition in the Philippines, the In Defense of Human Rights and Dignity movement. There have been 102. We have recently consolidated our figures, 102 children killed and depicted by this president as collateral damage. Now, I'd like to greet everyone. Warm greetings of human rights solidarity. Of course, as mentioned, most of us are already familiar with this dehumanizing war on drugs, which has claimed the lives of over 26,000 impoverished and beaten down Filipinos. And these are just the documented ones, no? There is a huge under-documentation in the Philippines, with a lot of families of victims not willing to come forward. The Skill Society's undesired policy is dehumanizing all Filipinos and has plunged us into the worst human rights crisis since the Marcos dictatorship. There have been 3 joint resolutions since the 35th session of the Human Rights Council on the Philippine situation. Sadly, with the Philippine civil society delegation present in this room, we found that at this 39th session, there is some circumspection and hesitancy amongst members of the international community to take action on the Philippines. We are still figuring out the reason for this, but we are here because this is not yesterday's news. As grassroots organizations, we bring the truth to the UN. The daily state-perpetrated, sponsored, sanctioned killings have not relented. They continue at the same horrific rate. The impunity remains institutionalized, with police and death squads continue to be shielded from accountability by the president. Extreme violence, the circumvention of due process and the rule of law, planting of evidence is still the norm in police operations. Forced quotas and reward systems for police are still enforced, and the death squad epidemic continues to be nurtured and backed by this violent regime. President Duterte's principal priority public strategy for solving the country's problems is still the extermination of addicts and criminals. At this rate, if nothing is done to arrest this social cleansing policy, the war on drugs will have claimed over 70,000 by the end of his term in 2022, if he steps down. The war on drugs human rights calamity is quite multifaceted. it is now also much about the rise of enforced disappearances and torture of drug suspects, in spite of the Philippines having a good anti-torture law and anti-enforced disappearance law. It's also about extreme overcrowding in places of deprivation of liberty. It's also about extortion of drug suspects and their loved ones. We have come to a well-grounded conclusion that the reason why President Duterte has completely ignored evidence-based and good practice responses to the drug issue and adamantly continues to pursue his illegal brand of justice is because he has no intentions whatsoever to resolve the drug problem. The war on drugs in the Philippines is a sham war and is a mere Duterte tool to advance and consolidate authoritarian rule. Duterte has politically weaponized the drug war, using it to establish a climate of fear and silence and instill obedience and subservience amongst the bureaucracy. By doing sample assassinations of those he tagged as narco-politicians, 18 local executives all in all, he has made it clear that any public official who does not toe the line can be accused and eliminated. The war on drugs is really just part of a much alarming, bigger scenario and Duterte bottom line, which we hope will spur the international community into action. For the past 2 years, the Duterte regime's principal preoccupation has been rendering fragile Philippine institutions ineffective, forcing the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, into subservience, co-opting the legislature, silencing any and all dissent and criticism and opposition, attacking checks and balances institutions, and building the state apparatus and machinery for dictatorship. These deliberate and systematic undertakings of Duterte include sustained attacks on our Commission on Human Rights defenders, media outfits, the Catholic and Protestant churches, persecution of political opposition through misogyny and judicial harassment, implementing a historical revisionism program that is rehabilitating the Marcos family, which has been backing him financially and politically, rehabilitating them both in name and politics. He established supermajorities in both legislative chambers, enabling the passage of authoritarian laws such as granting the police subpoena powers without any judicial order, removing the safeguards of the Anti-Terror Law or the Human Security Act of 2007, laws restricting foreign support to Philippine civil society, a national ID system, and of course, forcing still the reimposition of the death penalty and the lowering of the minimum age of criminal responsibility. The Duterte regime is also upgrading the Philippine surveillance infrastructure. It is engaged in pseudo mass movement organizing, which includes a well-oiled and financed propaganda machinery and a citizen surveillance network, Hitler style. The sustained demonization of human rights defenders and distortion of human rights values and principles has constricted all meaningful space for human rights discourse with any government agency. The total breakdown of the peace talks with the Communist Party of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front and the New People's Army is now starting to take place. This has now put in danger all agents of change in the Philippines. The now ongoing crackdown on human rights defenders, political, social, environmental, land rights, and indigenous peoples activists is resulting in the wholesale human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, and torture. The war on drugs, human rights calamity, and the onslaught on human rights defenders and activists is just half of the story. Unbeknown to the world, the undeclared Duterte dictatorship has another ugly head that has begun rearing itself. Massive human rights violations in the southern part of the Philippines, Mindanao, which has been under martial rule since May 2017, are starting to surface. We are now discovering that these atrocities may actually rival the magnitude of the drug war in terms of extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, torture, numerous rape cases, and violations of international humanitarian law. Going into economic, social, and cultural rights, this president has no working social justice agenda that will uplift the lives of the poor. Structures that maintain the vast majority of workers contractualized remain. Filipinos, especially indigenous peoples, continue to be ravaged by large-scale infrastructure and mining projects and other forms of development aggression. There are no programs to democratize essential or basic social services. A new set of Duterte cronies tainted with corruption has emerged. New tax reform laws have been forced legislated, which pass on to consumers the entire tax burden. This has seen the spike of the basic commodities and essentials and the commons. Dutertenomics has resulted in an all-time high inflation rate in the Philippines. With his popularity being threatened, Duterte is now rushing his handful of options toward one-man rule. What we are now confronted really is imminent dictatorship and the near demise of Philippine democracy. Space has drastically shrunk in our country, and this is the closest we have been to an authoritarian regime since the Marcos dictatorship. A weak Philippine institution, Philippine opposition makes formal dictatorship in the Philippines very much a possibility. The fast deteriorating in the situation in the Philippines is a disaster waiting to happen. The international community through the UN has the responsibility to prevent and protect, and the UN is equipped with an early warning system. This guy, explicitly said he would slaughter thousands. He attacked the very heart of the UN human rights system, cursing members of the Human Rights Council Special Procedures and the former High Commissioner. He has clearly waged a war on the poor, on human rights, on the rule of law and democracy, and has slaughtered and continues to slaughter into the thousands. His persisting social cleansing policy has been reinforcing would-be war on drugs implementers in other parts of the world. What message are we transmitting to despots who also intend to make human life cheap and establish dictatorships in their countries? What message do we send out if the international community does not make the Philippines one of its priority concerns? Now, given a completely submissive and co-opted Philippine judiciary, impartial investigations in the Philippines is impossible, or any affirmative action on the part of the state. The only recourse and hope for thousands of families of victims of extrajudicial killings and the forced disappearances in the Philippines to obtain justice and reparation is practical action by the UN Human Rights Council and the OHCHR. This is our only hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I think it was very important for you to place the very dire human rights violations that all of you described into this broader context of, so not only its massive violations and systematic violations of all human rights, civil and political, but also economic, social and cultural rights. So on no front we see real progress, despite what is being said, obviously. Human rights defenders blocking some development and potentially some economic and social progress, but also into this culture of impunity and fear that all of you really describe, and this consolidation of an authoritarian regime, with the war on drugs being only one tool and one element of this broader scenario that is attacking the rule of law and legislation and institution as a whole. But also the last point that you've made also with this asking for early warning, the use of early warning systems in the Human Rights Council and the Office of the High Commissioner, or let's say in the human rights system as a whole. It's also what kind of signal are we sending to other potential Dutertes in this world. But not wanting to take more time for potential discussion, I would like now to open the floor to anyone who would like to ask a question to our panelists or to make a comment. So the floor is to anyone who would like to. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Mikey from Dominicans for Justice and Peace. My question is, what would you say, who's behind Duterte, in the sense of what are the benefits of what he's doing? Okay, maybe one could talk about dictatorship or domination, but who's behind him? Who are those that are supporting him? Whether it be in terms of are there financial interests that are there? Whose are they? So we can understand more clearly what we're up against. It was clearly it's not just an individual.
Yeah, maybe, unless there is pressing need for taking the floor. No, I think you can just respond directly.
Well, for us, it's clear that Duterte is just a symptom of a much bigger problem in the Philippines. It's the 50 oligarch families, or who we refer to as the 1/10 of the 1%, which have refused to democratize essential services for the past 32 years, thus giving rise to such a person, Duterte, the failure of the 5 regimes which were elite-dominated. And thus now Duterte has aligned himself with 2 big players, no? The Marcos family, which has been financing him very much, as well as former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, the biggest plunderer after Marcos, who was imprisoned, who he exonerated. And so it's his regime is a mere realignment of the elite. And some of us actually believe that he's just, with charter change, he is actually, federalism, he's actually establishing, formalizing warlordism in various parts of the Philippines and actually securing his fiefdom, the Davao area, for his family. But it's really the elite section of the elite that felt left out that is getting a larger share of the pie. The elite from his part of the Philippines, Mindanao. And so this is just a reconfiguration of the big landed families, the Philippine oligarchy that is Duterte leading at the moment.
Any other comments or questions?
My name is Andrzej Owca. I am from Vivat International. I would like to ask you, maybe I missed something from your presentation, or maybe you didn't say, I don't know, but about international organizations or NGOs that are working, in the area of human rights, or even about missionaries working in the Philippines. What's the situation? Are they invited to leave? Are they persecuted? Would you like to say something about it? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. As the world knows, there is one nun, Sister Patricia Fox, who served the Philippines for about 27 years. But maybe she is an eyesore to Duterte, and plus his misogynistic acts. The government wanted her to be out without any reason, accusing her of communism rallies and other stuff. But in general, the church is very active. We are being persecuted as well. Every time there is a problem and he cannot solve it, his favorite institution is the church, because he knows that the church, or the Catholic Church, will not reply. 3 priests were being killed already. Father Mark Ventura, Father Tito Paez, Father Richmond Nilo, and we don't know, maybe more to come. And all human rights defenders who are working in the side of the church are being persecuted. They're red tagging, especially in Mindanao, those who really work hand in hand with the poor people. The problem with Duterte is he cannot really understand what a missionary is. As a missionary, we need to stand with our prophetic witnessing, and with that, we are working with the poor. And he is tagging us that every time that we are working with the poor hand in hand, we are working to destabilize his government. And every time he has the opportunity, he is attacking us just to cover up a lot of issues about poverty in general, especially nowadays that our basic commodities are very high. In the Philippines, you cannot buy something for a peso, and a poor people cannot own even a centavo, so they cannot buy a viand for a vegetable or a rice. And what had happened is, when he attacks the church, he is expecting that the church will respond. But in behalf of my colleagues in the church institution, the attack is continuous. But, well, we are here. Maybe Father Toots can add something.
Okay.
No, you don't want to ask.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
add something. Yeah.
Sure.
There has been several instances when actually individuals coming from abroad raising concern have actually not been allowed to enter the country. That includes Mr. Giacomo Filibek of the Progressive Alliance. I think early this year that was because of the Progressive Alliance's report on the Philippines, but also restrictions on foreign funding. So I think a big conference did not take place because the funding for that was restricted by the Philippine government. So there's now an uptake on clamping down on the work of agents of change and NGOs, civil society in the Philippines.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm from Réseau International des Droits de l'Homme. Maybe it's evident, but I didn't really get it. Why the Philippines problem isn't taken so seriously here in this session? The ICC couldn't do an investigation. Why is it so difficult?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, as I've mentioned, we're still trying to figure out, no? But back in the Philippines also, it's become more difficult to document for the media, courageous media to document cases. And also there's media reporting fatigue. Sadly, the daily killings have become normal. And it's desensitizing Filipinos. Maybe that's happening elsewhere in the world as well. But in terms of the ICC, that's a long-term goal, no? Of course, we're working on that. Civil society groups in the Philippines are exploring that avenue, and we're making sure that a complementarity is ensured in the Philippines. We're proving that state agencies, institutions are unable and unwilling. That it's already difficult for impartial investigations there to take place. One way or the other, this president will be held accountable, including his cohorts.
Thank you. Yes.
I am Jarandisa Pichai, Thai, and former National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, and now political asylum in France. So I would like to know the Human Rights Commission of Philippines could do nothing. Thailand had passed the drug war, and at that time I was member of National Human Rights Commission, and we received many complaints from the victim, but we did listen. So I would like to know. I would like to know.
Well, our National Human Rights Institution, the Commission on Human Rights, is actually a very small institution that is very much under pressure and under attack by this president. And also the president controls, has super majorities in both legislative chambers of the Philippines, the Senate and the House of Representatives, which actually have the power to restrict the budget of the Commission on Human Rights, which they actually did already to 1,000 pesos in a demonstration of power a year ago. And so the Commission on Human Rights is quite intimidated and has to be very careful. Also, related to the ICC is that the Commission on Human Rights, as well as us, human rights organizations, have a hard time linking the command structures, because the majority of the killings really have to do with the death squads. And so the command structures, what links them to the police, and then command structures to President Duterte. And so the Commission on Human Rights is handling many cases, but unfortunately, few have prospered or are starting to prosper in the Philippine judicial system.
Our Commission on Human Rights the National Commission on Human Rights is also under attack. And in fact, I talked to some of the officials in Cebu. The problem is that when there's a case and they give a subpoena to the police does not cooperate. And so the case is not moving. So in a way, they are also persecuted, this Commission on Human Rights. And but it's a constitutional body, and openly the president would want to dissolve that body, but you cannot do that. It's a constitutional body. So, and they are not popular, especially for the supporters of the president.
Thank you. I think I have a last hand there. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, I'm Eileen Bacalso. I'm from the Asian Federation Against Involuntary Disappearances, or AFAD. Considering that the Philippines is a Christian country, predominantly Christian country and Catholic country, I would like to ask Father Angel and Father Christian on what is their assessment on the response of the church, particularly the Catholic Church, or the churches in general, to this phenomenon of extrajudicial killings, disappearances, torture, compared to the situation during the time of Cardinal Sin. So what is the present situation? And I think you've mentioned that 3 priests have been killed in the last 6 months.
Well, as we know, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines made a statement about it, a strong statement. But as a typical institution, some do not go by the statement alone or by their principles, and some are they remain to keep quiet. But as an institution, they have the stand to really refute this culture of impunity that is happening in our country. But as a reception for missionaries and religious, like the Association of Major Religious Superiors in the Philippines, there's a big and a massive response by taking care of the families and the witnesses. There are institutions who are specialized just to take care of the victims. There are nuns who are taking care of the psychosocial aspect of these extrajudicial killings. But with these responses, we are being attacked and we are being persecuted in some areas, especially those areas that the government knows that the church is very active. That's why in my work, I know a lot of my colleagues in the church are really having a hard time of expressing their sentiments, especially not using the pulpit, but using our opportunity to help. That's why to answer that question, there is a big and massive response with the church institution. The only problem is Duterte's favorite institution to attack is the Catholic Church, because he knows that we will not how do you call that? Yeah, we will not give up. So, Father Toots?
Yeah, so if there are 27,000 and counting deaths, there must be thousands of widows and orphans and who lost their brothers and sisters. And so, well, when we say church, the institutional church, the bishops, they made a statement, beautifully written. life, respect life like that. Don't kill. You are not supposed to kill. But again, in the concrete implementation, that would really depend. Like for example, in the Diocese of Caloocan, where the vice president of the conference is the bishop, every night 30 deaths. So 30 deaths, block by then apart, another block. And so, aside from cemetery aid, mortuary aid, what can we do? So, the justice and peace has to be worked out and revived and revitalized. So that's one. In fairness, there are bishops who are really very serious with this. And openly, they denounce killings. At the same time, they offer their churches as sanctuaries. And this is not an overnight deal, no? There are religious congregations, orders who get this because for fear of life also. There were cases that first the husband was killed, after 6 months the wife was killed. And what shall we do with the 2 children? So they are to be adopted or put somewhere. So the church is doing something in fairness, especially the religious orders and congregations. But it should not be only like that. So we need also, we are also lobbying the support of other church bodies internationally.
Thank you very much. I think I have, if it's very, very quick, because we are ending the, but you should come and try to get a mic to access the microphone.
My name is Faisal Foulad. I'm General Coordinator for Arab International Network. Actually, I want to appreciate the brave of the people on the stage and their support to human rights in Philippines. My question, who blame now? Is it the system, is it the president, or is it the gang, the mafia, who dealing with the crimes in Philippines? Everybody knows that years there was a corruption government in Philippines, and military was controlled Philippines. Now there is a big problem is the drug. So who will blame? Is it the president, or we should also blame the others who make trafficking and abuse the human rights? Thank you.
Actually, the president spread misperceptions about the Philippines being a narco state. The Philippines is not at all a narco state. We work at the very grassroots, urban poor communities. The rungs of the drug trade is actually composed of police officers, the higher rungs, which recycle drugs. So actually, drugs is imported into the Philippines, but we do not have existing cartels just like Mexico and other countries which Duterte compared our country to. So mostly you have those who are being killed are petty drug peddlers, and our human rights scholars actually refer to the situation in the Philippines as police vigilantism, where there are close links between the police and the vigilante groups. It's not at all the big traders who have hired guns. That is not true in the Philippines at all. So the higher ranks of the drug trade are composed of corrupt police officers.
It's not about blaming who's who, but it's about the appeal of humanity, what is happening in the Philippines. It's about the daily killings. It's about the young people, the children. It's about the reality. That's why gentlemen and women of the international community, in behalf of the people of the Philippines, we plead to help us, the missions and all the NGOs, that this message will be brought not only to the United Nations but to the world.
So very quickly.
Sure.
Yeah, just to explain that the spike of vigilante or death squad killings came after Duterte came into power, when he said they encouraged armed sections, non-state actors to participate in the killings. So he is responsible for bringing the death squad epidemic to the national level. and there is no affirmative action on the part of the state, concrete actions to actually resolve the death squad killings. So clearly, he is responsible for omission, commission, and arbitrary derogation to the right to life.
Thank you very much. And I think with this very strong last quote, we will end the session. I think it was indeed very important to demystify also some of the messages or the narratives that have been spread, and this was really one of the main objectives of our event today. So I think in the name of all of us, we can only feel sorry to have shown this very horrible pictures and videos, but I think it's, as you all understood, even if you didn't know before, it's the dire reality in the Philippines. And so with that, we hope that we have at least contributed to raise even more the awareness about the still ongoing catastrophes and attacks against humanity that are happening in the Philippines. And I think I just would like to end with, again, wishing a lot of solidarity and courage to our three panelists, but also to other colleagues from the Philippines for the courage, or to give you courage to continue the work, not only for being able to come here and raise these issues, but obviously back in the country. And we will continue to monitor and to raise the issues here from our end. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.